how do you, I suppose, when you started seeing all the evidence of it coming to light, what worked for you and you saw it on people, how do you take that all in and your energy, because you're seeing this and like there's gonna be a lot of people who have spontaneous remissions, but I mean, I always say to people, and I feel there's always a story there, is it that one person that truly made an impact, and how did that like send shivers down your spine, or just go, wow, what we've created here is just incredible?
Listen, I mean, you're spot on. I mean, I consider myself a pretty open-minded person. I mean, I have a pretty good bullshit meter too. Like I have a truth meter that like I'm a practical person.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about quantum superposition if it doesn't change my life in any way. I want to know how it's going to affect my life. I'm a pragmatist. Mm-hmm. So I consider myself a pretty open-minded person, but I'm skeptical about things because I want to challenge them in a way that I think it really helps people, right? So when I saw, some of the dramatic changes take place, I never thought in my lifetime that I would be witnessing what I witness in every single week-long event that we've done, and we've done 30 of them now, and it's never been a disappointment. There's just a transformative thing that takes place that is way bigger than me. So when you see a person with a stroke who's blind in the quarter of their vision or has paralysis and can't move an arm, and you see that vision completely restored, and then you see the scan that shows there's no longer any blemish or damage to the visual field, you can't go back to business as usual. You can't go back to being the same person. Once you know, you can't not know. and it's so beautiful because consciousness is awareness, and awareness is noticing and paying attention. So when you see a person who has a transformation, and you see the science that says in a week-long event, there'll be over 600 metabolic changes in 75% of the audience for the better in a one-week event. When you know that, you're aware of another possibility that may not be the possibility that we think is free will to choose from knowns. This is now, you're stepping outside. And when a person shows up and believes in themselves and does the work, they're believing in possibility. You cannot believe in possibility and believe in yourself. Not believe in yourself. You got to believe in yourself and believe in possibility. You got to believe in possibility. You got to believe in yourself. So for me personally, it's way bigger than me. I'm very humbled on a regular basis. Every time I get another testimonial, I say this person is speaking the truth, and it's a footprint for somebody else to step into, and I think the world needs that more than ever. So for me, my greatest passion, my greatest joy, I think there's something in us, Glenn, that's so empathetic. Now we have universities that are studying people that can be healed remotely. You don't even need to be in their presence. If you understand the science of quantum physics and you understand how to do it, you can hit a target and heal another person at a distance, and there it is, and there it's gone. Now, when you see that occur, there's some kind of empathy. I drop in on the calls of these people that show up every single day of their life to heal another person, and they do at least 3 or 4 a day. And these people, they're not doing it because they want to be a healer. They're doing it because, well, how they feel when they see a mother who's comes on the Zoom call and says, my daughter was, handicapped from birth. She had a traumatic birth. She's listless, unresponsive, never looked at her brothers. And all of a sudden, this kid is smiling at her brothers and trying to talk. And you watch the people on the Zoom call that are the healers. You see we're all in tears. There's this empathy that takes place where we're contributing as a species to one another, that we were part of somebody's transformation. We gave in some way. Another one of us is better, and this kind of feeling of empathy, this feeling of connection is so profound that goes against all those survival and stress emotions that create division and polarity and separation and distrust. And so that's when community starts coming together. That's when we start to cooperate, and it's got to be from the heart. So I'm super hopeful about what we're doing.
Well, I think I would personally be terrible, because the fact that anything these days can make me cry when it comes to community, I can bring people together through the mental health. And someone once said to me, how does it make you feel? And I'll sit in an event, sit back, not even speak, and just see that human connection. And you mentioned it quite a bit, because one of the fundamentals that you mentioned as a characteristics was touching base. You talk about the science space, but you said a lot of people almost have that spiritual sense, and you keep mentioning this, stepping into their truth. And it's kind of something along my journey that I've realized that the way that I've rewired my brain from going through adversity to building this and it growing so fast has been really learning about stepping into my truth. And I did use meditation a lot through that, how it came. So I suppose my question would be in relation to the Imperfectly Perfect campaign and addressing well-being and mental health. When emotions are almost captured in that survival mode, what is happening in terms of neurologically, when many times we see a correlation between people fearing the future or living in the past, I suppose, how do we, or could we create those habits to bring ourselves back?
Yeah, well, let's see if I can explain this as simple as possible. Living in stress is living in survival. And survival is a very primitive mechanism that allows us to really adapt to an environment that's threatening or dangerous. The moment you perceive a danger or a threat, you switch on an autonomic function in your body, the sympathetic nervous system, and there's an arousal. The arousal of those hormones causes a heightening of the senses, because now we want to become more acute, that there's a danger there. If there's a tiger in the bushes and you hear something rumbling around and it's night, you're going to either run, fight, or freeze, or hide. That's your choices. And so that works really well in survival for the short term, because the arousal causes us feeling like we're more our body. We get a rush of energy. The arousal causes our brain waves to change and to move into a more alert state. We narrow our focus on what it is in the environment. We're giving it our attention, all of our attention. And now we're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future based on what we've known in the past. So we're overlaying a known into the future so that we can prepare. And normally when we don't know what it is, the unknown causes us to feel these primitive emotions of survival, and it's best to run. It's best to fear the unknown. So the challenge becomes that works really well for the short term. But when you switch on this system and you're mobilizing enormous amounts of the body's energy and resources for some threat in your outer world, there's no energy in your inner world for growth and repair. There's no energy for long-term building projects. And we start tapping the body's vital resources, and that's what creates mental health or physical health or spiritual disease, right? So because no organism can live in that emergency state for that extended period of time. It's like there's a hurricane coming through Australia, you're not going to be thinking about remodeling your kitchen at that time. It's not a time for long-term projects, right? So now when we're in stress and we're in survival, the self is the most important. You don't trust, it's not a time to love, it's not a time to learn, it's not a time to communicate, it's not a time to be vulnerable, it's not a time to open your heart, it's not the time to sit down and close your eyes and go within. You would be eaten. The survival gene is switched on. And people spend 70% of their time living in this state. So then in that state where the arousal takes place, the brain moves into a heightened brainwave pattern called beta brainwave pattern. Now, as I said, that's like driving your sports car in first gear on the freeway. It's the jump start, but you can't do it for a long period of time, because in stress is signaled by the loss of control. not being able to predict the next moment, the unknown, or the perception that something's going to get worse. And when you're in that state, you start trying to control and predict everything in your life, and you shift your attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another place, to another object, to a group of situations. And every one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal causes the brain, like a lightning storm in the clouds, to start firing out of order. It starts firing incoherently. And when the brain is incoherent, we're incoherent. When the brain isn't working right, we're not working right. So then now the person is aroused in that state. It's never occurred to them that they could change that. In fact, they're telling you, I am this way because of my boss, because of my ex, because of my past, because of the news, because of the global situation, whatever it is. And what they're really saying is, I'm using something in my outer environment to validate or justify why I feel this way. So then that means then they're also going to be dependent on something in their outer environment to make them feel better. And whether it's a drug or a treatment or whatever it is, complaining, whatever it is that makes them feel better. And the moment they notice that they've done something and they've used something outside of them to make that feeling go away, they'll pay attention to what it was. And every time they feel that feeling, they'll become dependent on it. So now they're more dependent on their environment. So then the subconscious program is, when things are good, you feel good. But when things are bad, you feel bad. So you're completely victim to your environment. And the environment is actually controlling the way you feel and think. Now, anything that controls the way you feel and think, you're victim to. So I say, Glenn, why are you in such a bad mood? Well, I'm in this bad mood because of this person, this circumstance, this situation in my life. What you're really saying is, something in my outer environment is literally controlling my feelings, my emotions, and my thoughts. So then it turns out that when the person is in that state and they're in that aroused state, their heart is beating because the sympathetic nervous system switched on, but they're not running. They're not fighting, they're not hiding, they're stepping on the gas pedal and they're stepping on the brake. And the heart starts beating very incoherently. And incoherent waves in the brain and incoherent waves in the heart diminish energy. So energy goes out of the brain, energy goes out of the heart, we stop thinking clearly, we stop rationalizing very well, we can't plan for the future, we're uninspired. In our heart, we don't trust, we can't feel gratitude, we can't feel appreciation, we can't feel love. It's not a time to feel any of those things. So then that's the beginning of disease, right? So the person starts thinking about their problems and they turn on that stress response just by thought alone. And if the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease, then your thoughts are going to make you sick. And the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible that your thoughts can make you well? And by the same means, if you're using every person, every circumstance in your life to reaffirm that dependency on that rush of emotions, then you become addicted to the life you don't even like. That's why change is so hard, because you'd rather suffer and be in pain than take a chance in the unknown, because the unknown, you can't predict it. So people cling to the familiar and cling to the known, and so they become dependent on the environment. So what we found out was, is there a way to make the brain more coherent? Is there a formula that we can teach people? Instead of narrowing their focus on the material world, narrowing their focus on everything known, what if they broaden their focus and they put it on nothing, on space? If they broaden their focus and they open their awareness in this way, what happens to the brain? And we found the brain gets really organized. What if they traded fear for an elevated emotion, and we taught them how to start working with their body? Now here's the answer to your question. You practice that long enough, you close your eyes, you're not distracted by your environment, you're sitting down, you're not eating, you're not talking, you're not watching TV, you're not on your cell phone, you're not smelling, you're not tasting, you're not feeling with your body, you're sitting still, you're not thinking about your schedule of what you got to do or what happened yesterday, and you're working with the body and you're understanding the process. You keep settling the body down when it's aroused. You keep watching your body wanting to get up and do something, you keep bringing it back, and you're training your body to a new mind. It turns out if you keep practicing this, the body finally surrenders to a new mind, and there's a liberation of energy, and the person releases a little of that anger. They release a little bit of that fear, and the body can relax more into the present moment, and energy moves into the heart. We've measured this so many times. When once energy makes it to the heart informs the brain. It's safe to create. It's safe to think about a possibility of how to get out of this situation. So then it's really good to do it with your eyes closed when there's soft music playing in the background and you're relaxed and your eyes are closed and you're in a safe environment. But that's training. Because when it matters the most is when it's the hardest to do. And I don't like that answer at all, but it's the absolute truth. I mean, when you're the most frustrated, when you're the most impatient, when you're the most agitated, when you're the most in the most amount of pain, is it possible then to dial down those survival emotions and practice getting back in your heart, to shorten the refractory period of your emotional reactions? Because when you're living in those emotions, there's always a gap between the way things appear and the way things really are.
Yeah.
And if you act during that time and you do something, you make a choice during that time, you'll always say the same thing. I should have never said that. I should have never sent that email. I never sent that text, because you were altered in some way. And that's when people knee-jerk, right? So in our events in the past, we've seen people sustain this kind of coherence in their brain and heart for 45 minutes to an hour. They know how to do it. But now the next step is to put them in a situation where they normally would feel fear or some survival emotion, and instead of throwing in a program and rushing and going unconscious, teaching them how to self-regulate. So you put someone on a post 50 feet in the air, they're, I don't know, 25 meters up there, and you get somebody, or 20 meters up there, you get somebody standing on that post, and they're wearing a heart rate monitor, and it's not whether they succeed or fail, it's whether they can practice slowing that state down. And if they can do it there, they'll do it really well in their life. So then when everybody else is in fear, you seem to be calm and present. When everybody else is angry and impatient, you seem to be relaxed and poised. So we now know that learning how to move from that state of survival to that state of creation is a skill, and it takes practice. And when we do that and we're triumphant, we're no longer part of that same consciousness. We're in a different consciousness. And that is what gives people permission. When they observe you, they'll say, Glenn, you're really different than everybody else. Something's different about you, because you're not showing up like the collective. You're showing up in a different way, and that gives them permission to try it out as well.